Hello everyone. Tonight we explore the story of Cleopatra VII, the last queen of Egypt, a woman whose name dripped with power and danger, whose every move could shift the fate of empires. Born into a kingdom steeped in ancient wealth and political treachery, she would rise amid assassinations, betrayals, and the relentless roar of war. Rivers of blood flowed through the sands of her lands as she fought to preserve her throne, forging alliances with Rome's most formidable leaders. Her charm was a weapon, her mind a battlefield, her ambition an unstoppable force. Love, deception, and death danced at her feet while enemies plotted her downfall. Every decision could spark triumph or ruin, every glance could ignite wars. In a world where kings fell by dagger or poison, Cleopatra stood unbroken, daring, irresistible, and utterly unforgettable. Cleopatra VII was born in 69 BC in Alexandria, the jewel of the Egyptian Empire, a city alive with grandeur, trade, and political intrigue. Her family, the Ptolemies, had ruled for generations, a dynasty notorious for ambition and ruthless internal strife. Cleopatra's father, Ptolemy XII, was a calculating monarch, wary of betrayal even within his palace walls. Her mother, likely Cleopatra V, was shadowed by mystery, leaving Cleopatra to navigate a court filled with secrecy and cautious allies. Despite immense wealth surrounding her, Cleopatra's early life was shaped by uncertainty, as her family's position teetered on the knife edge of Roman politics and domestic conspiracies. From the very start, Cleopatra's environment was charged with danger. She grew up amidst palace intrigues, where siblings schemed for power and courtiers whispered rumors that could ignite lethal conflicts. The streets of Alexandria were alive with merchants, soldiers, and spies, a constant reminder of the empire's fragile stability. Her earliest memories were of hearing hushed debates about alliances, threats, and strategies, shaping a young mind keenly aware of the stakes in every word and gesture. Even as a child, Cleopatra exhibited an insatiable curiosity, absorbing the languages, customs, and histories of her diverse city. She was not content with toys or idle play. She questioned scholars, studied maps, and listened intently to the stories of conquest and betrayal that flowed through the palace corridors. Her intelligence, already sharp, was coupled with an innate charisma that drew attention and respect from adults who underestimated the young princess at their peril. Cleopatra's early personality combined daring and caution. She observed, calculated, and learned from every interaction, displaying a blend of charm and steely determination. While other children might seek only comfort or amusement, she found fascination in understanding power, influence, and the hidden levers that moved the empire. Even within the gilded halls of the palace, she felt the undercurrent of danger, and it molded her into someone who could charm and manipulate with equal skill. Her hobbies reflected her extraordinary mind, reading papyrus scrolls, practicing rhetoric, and engaging in debates with tutors and visiting scholars. These activities were not merely pastimes, they were instruments sharpening her intellect for the battles she would one day face. Cleopatra was a child of contrasts, playful yet calculating, affectionate yet wary, brilliant yet acutely aware of mortal vulnerability. She began to understand that survival in her world depended on intellect as much as courage, a lesson that would echo through every stage of her life. Cleopatra's early childhood was marked by moments of wonder and sudden peril. She roamed the palace gardens, marveled at the bustling harbour, and listened to exotic musicians, yet shadows of political unrest were never far. Assassinations and betrayals were whispered in the corridors, and young Cleopatra learned quickly which alliances were safe and which could lead to ruin. The contrast between opulent luxury and lurking danger taught her the precarious nature of power, shaping a mind both vigilant and ambitious. Siblings, though companions in youth, were also rivals. Cleopatra's interactions with her brothers, especially Ptolemy XIII and later Ptolemy XIV, were a blend of affection and strategic observation. She noted their weaknesses and strengths, storing knowledge that would later guide her in both alliance and confrontation. Even family dinners could become lessons in diplomacy, survival, and manipulation, as every smile or slight might harbour future consequences. Her early education was rigorous. Cleopatra learned Greek, the language of her dynasty, along with Egyptian and perhaps other regional dialects, absorbing literature, philosophy, and the arts. Tutors provided more than academics. They trained her in political thought, the histories of empires, and the delicate art of persuasion. Each lesson reinforced her sense of responsibility and the heavy burden that awaited her as heir to a throne teeming with ambition and danger. The bustling city of Alexandria itself served as a classroom. Cleopatra observed traders haggling, sailors plotting journeys, and soldiers drilling along the harbour. The multicultural tapestry of the city exposed her to diplomacy and strategy in action, showing her that power required both force and cunning. Even in leisure, she explored libraries, studied maps of distant lands, and debated with philosophers, absorbing wisdom that would make her a formidable ruler. Despite the challenges, Cleopatra's charm and intelligence earned her early loyalty from attendants and tutors. She was a young princess who commanded attention not through fear, but through presence, curiosity, and perceptive understanding of human behavior. These formative years laid the foundation for a leader capable of navigating betrayal, wielding influence, and mastering the lethal game of politics in a world where survival and dominance were inseparable. Cleopatra's education was unparalleled, even among royalty. From a young age, she was tutored in philosophy, literature, mathematics, astronomy, and medicine, absorbing knowledge with insatiable curiosity. Her tutors, often Greek scholars exiled or brought to Alexandria for their brilliance, pushed her intellect relentlessly. She mastered multiple languages, including Greek, Egyptian, and possibly Hebrew and Latin, giving her the ability to communicate directly with allies, enemies, and subjects alike. Cleopatra's mind became a weapon as sharp as any sword, capable of swaying opinion and orchestrating strategy. Beyond academics, she cultivated an array of passions. Music, theatre, and poetry enriched her sensibilities, while political treatises and historical accounts honed her understanding of power and empire. Cleopatra's ability to debate, negotiate, and charm her way through difficult circumstances emerged early. She watched her father's dealings with Rome closely, noting the balance of fear, diplomacy, and wealth, and understanding that influence was more potent than brute force. Social interactions were lessons in survival. Cleopatra mingled with nobles, courtiers, and foreign envoys, observing every nuance of loyalty and deception. She learned to discern who could be trusted, who might betray, and who held the keys to ambition. Her beauty, intelligence, and confidence drew admiration, yet she remained acutely aware that envy and intrigue lurked beneath every flattering smile. These early experiences shaped her capacity for both charm and calculated ruthlessness. Mentorship played a crucial role. Senior advisors, seasoned generals, and visiting dignitaries recognized her potential and tested her intellect with complex negotiations and hypothetical conflicts. Cleopatra absorbed these lessons as if they were lifeblood, transforming theory into instinct. She learned not only how to win arguments, but also how to orchestrate outcomes in a world governed by shifting alliances, ambition, and deadly consequences. Even in leisure, Cleopatra pursued intellectual mastery. She studied geography to understand trade routes, the Nile's seasonal patterns, and the surrounding desert's strategic importance. She dissected political systems of neighboring kingdoms, analyzing their strengths and vulnerabilities. Her hobbies were never idle. Each study, each debate, each exploration of knowledge served as preparation for the throne she would one day claim with audacity, cunning, and unparalleled skill. Cleopatra's teenage years deepened her engagement with leadership and diplomacy. Observing her father's interactions with Rome, she noted the delicate balance of fear, tribute, and strategic marriage alliances. She understood that a ruler's survival depended not just on military might, but on perception, persuasion, and timing. Early signs of ambition and political acumen became evident as she began advising her father in private councils, offering insights that were sometimes daring enough to surprise seasoned ministers. Her intellectual curiosity extended into sciences and medicine. Cleopatra studied the human body, poisons and remedies, gaining knowledge that would later serve both her personal protection and political maneuvering. Her understanding of chemistry and pharmacology gave her the tools to manipulate fate, whether through diplomacy, seduction, or the threat of lethal precision. Even in adolescence, she combined intellect with instinct, blending knowledge and intuition in ways that would define her reign. Art and culture were intertwined with her education. Cleopatra mastered rhetoric, poetry, and music, understanding that influence over hearts could rival the power of armies. She used performances and recitations to test her ability to captivate audiences, cultivating charisma that would become legendary. These skills were not mere vanity, they were instruments to command attention, build alliances, and manipulate both allies and adversaries in the dangerous political landscape surrounding her. Early encounters with war and politics left lasting impressions. She witnessed revolts, court conspiracies, and Roman interventions in Egypt, understanding that survival required both cunning and courage. Her observations taught her the harsh reality that loyalty was transient, and power was often won or lost in a single decisive action. Cleopatra internalized these lessons, combining them with her natural intelligence to prepare for a future where she would navigate enemies on multiple fronts. Her youthful ambitions were tempered by personal insight. Cleopatra recognized the precariousness of life at the pinnacle of power. She developed a keen sense of timing, the ability to read intentions, and the art of subtle persuasion. These formative years forged a leader capable of charm, ruthlessness, and strategic brilliance. A woman destined to confront Rome, manipulate empires, and carve a place in history that no betrayal, no war, and no conspiracy could ever erase. Cleopatra's teenage years hardened her into a figure of unmatched poise and strategic intelligence. As her brothers jostled for influence, she observed each action, each whisper of betrayal, storing knowledge like a silent weapon. The streets of Alexandria teemed with intrigue, foreign merchants, and spies, offering her a living classroom in negotiation, loyalty, and manipulation. Even youthful games were lessons in politics. Every choice, every alliance mattered. Her personality evolved into a blend of ambition and pragmatism. Cleopatra displayed both daring and patience, recognizing when to act and when to wait. Early encounters with political turmoil revealed her resilience. Palace plots, Roman envoys, and sibling rivalries forced her to calculate risks with precision. She developed a keen understanding that survival in her world required intellect, charm, and a willingness to wield power decisively. War and military strategy entered her consciousness as the Ptolemaic dynasty faced external threats. Cleopatra observed generals training soldiers, planning campaigns, and executing complex maneuvers. She learned to analyze logistics, terrain, and morale, understanding that military knowledge was indispensable for a ruler. Even from the sidelines, she absorbed the essence of command, preparing for a day when she herself would lead armies and negotiate from a position of strength. Family influence remained a defining force. Her father's cautious rule and her siblings' ambition provided constant lessons in governance, deception, and the fragility of alliances. Cleopatra recognized that authority was not granted by birth alone. It required strategic insight, psychological acumen, and the ability to navigate treacherous relationships. Each family interaction was a test, shaping a mind attuned to both opportunity and threat. Amid this turbulent formation, Cleopatra's charisma matured. She learned to captivate, persuade, and intimidate with equal effect. Courtiers, tutors, and visiting dignitaries began to notice her presence, her intellect, and her capacity for leadership. These formative years crystallized a leader capable of commanding loyalty, manipulating rivals, and facing the harshest tests of her era with a combination of brilliance, charm, and ruthless calculation. Cleopatra's early adulthood was a crucible of ambition and survival. Political tension in Alexandria escalated as her father's health declined, and Roman influence intensified. She observed the delicate interplay between domestic factions and foreign powers, realizing that intellect and adaptability would determine her fate. Every conversation, every courtly smile, and every gesture of allegiance carried weight, shaping the instincts of a ruler who would command not only Egypt, but the attention of the world. Her relationships with siblings deepened in complexity. While outwardly diplomatic, she studied Ptolemy XIII and others for vulnerabilities, anticipating rivalries that might end in exile or death. Cleopatra's understanding of human nature sharpened. She recognized that familial ties could be both shields and daggers. This awareness prepared her for alliances and confrontations that would define her reign, where trust was a currency as rare as gold and as dangerous as a weapon. Romantic and political alliances became entwined during this period. Cleopatra understood that influence over powerful men could safeguard her throne and extend her power. She observed Rome's elite, learning to navigate their ambitions while preserving her sovereignty. Even before formal courtship, she displayed a blend of allure and intellect that would captivate Julius Caesar and later Mark Antony, shaping the fate of nations through both personal and political bonds. Her first steps into governance were subtle but impactful. Cleopatra advised her father on taxation, trade, and diplomacy, demonstrating acumen that impressed and occasionally intimidated court officials. She began to exercise authority in minor disputes and administrative decisions, learning to balance justice with pragmatism. These early acts of leadership laid the groundwork for her future reign, teaching her that and required both wisdom and decisive action. By the time she reached adulthood, Cleopatra had fused intellect, charisma, and strategic insight into a formidable persona. She was ready to seize opportunity, manipulate rivals, and confront threats with both courage and cunning. The Princess of Alexandria had transformed into a woman whose presence commanded attention, whose mind plotted with precision, and whose ambition would soon ignite the most dramatic chapter in Egypt's history. Cleopatra's early adulthood was defined by calculated alliances and the delicate balancing of power. At a young age, she was married to her brother Ptolemy XIII, following Egyptian tradition to preserve royal bloodlines. The marriage was political, fraught with tension, and underscored the perilous environment of her court. Cleopatra's intelligence and charisma were immediately apparent, allowing her to navigate a relationship that was both a familial duty and a political necessity, where love was secondary to survival and influence. Her domestic life was a theatre of intrigue. Cleopatra observed every move of her husband and his advisors, noting loyalties, weaknesses, and ambitions. Even in private, the palace was a battlefield of whispers, with courtiers, guards, and officials acting as both allies and potential betrayers. Cleopatra's ability to assess character, anticipate betrayal, and manipulate perceptions became essential tools, shaping her approach to governance and diplomacy in a world where deception was a constant companion. Children and family responsibilities were intertwined with political strategy. Cleopatra had no children at this stage, but she meticulously studied the roles heirs played in cementing alliances and preserving dynastic power. She learned that family could be both a fortress and a threat, and that control over legacy demanded both intelligence and ruthlessness. Every conversation, every decision, every observation contributed to her growing mastery of power. Her early role in governance was subtle but influential. Cleopatra advised on state matters, from economic policies to diplomatic negotiations, often challenging senior advisors with insights that reflected not only knowledge, but also courage. Her interventions were carefully calculated, earning respect from some while drawing the envy of others. She displayed early signs of the audacity and strategic brilliance that would later define her reign, positioning herself as a ruler capable of both diplomacy and decisive action. During this period, Cleopatra also began to cultivate relationships with external powers, notably Rome. She recognized the empire's growing influence and understood that survival depended on strategic alliances. Her awareness of foreign politics, combined with her ability to charm, negotiate, and manipulate, laid the foundation for future partnerships with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. These early connections would prove critical in her quest to secure Egypt's sovereignty and extend her personal power across the Mediterranean world. Cleopatra's court was a place of constant tension. Her marriage to Ptolemy XIII remained politically charged, with sibling rivalry simmering beneath every interaction. She learned quickly that authority was never absolute. Power depended on perception, loyalty, and the careful orchestration of influence. Her intelligence and charm allowed her to navigate dangerous disputes, winning allies while neutralizing potential threats within the palace. The political significance of her union extended beyond Egypt. Cleopatra recognized that marriage was a tool for diplomacy, a bridge to Rome, and a statement of legitimacy. She balanced familial obligations with strategic foresight, maneuvering to secure her position while mitigating the ambitions of her brother. Her awareness of these dynamics reflected a maturity and foresight beyond her years. Her role in governance expanded as tensions with Ptolemy XIII intensified. Cleopatra began asserting authority over key decisions, managing taxation, trade, and domestic disputes. She demonstrated an early ability to blend diplomacy with strategy, balancing mercy and firmness to maintain loyalty among advisors and citizens. These actions revealed a ruler in the making, capable of decisive and calculated leadership. Cleopatra's relationships within the royal household were equally complex. Courtiers and officials often acted as both confidants and informants, testing her ability to discern truth from deception. She developed a keen sense of human behavior, learning to anticipate betrayal, manipulate perception, and leverage her influence. These skills would later prove essential in confronting the machinations of Rome and the ambitions of her rivals. As her reputation grew, Cleopatra's intelligence and charm drew attention beyond Egypt's borders. Envoys from Rome observed her skillful navigation of court politics, noting her eloquence, intellect, and commanding presence. These early connections and perceptions set the stage for her legendary alliances with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony, alliances that would secure her throne, influence Mediterranean politics, and cement her place in history as one of the most brilliant and formidable rulers the world has ever seen. Cleopatra's path to the throne began amid turmoil. Ptolemy XII's death left Egypt vulnerable, with rival factions vying for influence. Cleopatra, already astute in politics and strategy, seized the moment to assert her claim. She positioned herself as the legitimate heir, blending political acumen with personal charm to win over court officials, military leaders, and citizens. Every word and gesture was calculated to secure loyalty and undermine rivals, marking the emergence of a ruler who understood power as both art and weapon. Her coronation was a spectacle of authority and strategy. Cleopatra presented herself not merely as a figurehead, but as a sovereign capable of command, diplomacy, and vision. She navigated court intrigue with precision, securing support from key advisors while subtly neutralizing those whose loyalties were uncertain. The city of Alexandria, alive with anticipation and whispers of betrayal, became a stage on which Cleopatra demonstrated her mastery of both perception and power. Initial challenges were immediate and daunting. Cleopatra faced Ptolemy XIII's supporters, foreign powers seeking advantage, and internal unrest fueled by centuries of dynastic tension. Her ability to make swift, decisive choices, whether in diplomacy, domestic policy, or military positioning, proved critical. Cleopatra's early reign demanded courage, foresight, and the ability to manipulate perception, all while maintaining an image of legitimacy and authority. Advisors and court politics tested her every move. Cleopatra's intelligence and charm allowed her to sway ministers, generals, and envoys, yet she remained vigilant, recognizing that betrayal could come from the most trusted quarters. She developed a keen sense of timing and strategy, ensuring that each decision reinforced her power and weakened potential threats. Her reign began as a delicate balance of assertiveness and subtle manipulation. Internally, Cleopatra wrestled with fears and ambitions that shaped her approach to rulership. She understood the precariousness of her position, aware that rivals and foreign powers could challenge her authority at any moment. Her ambition, however, was tempered by pragmatism. She would not simply inherit a throne, she would command it, expand its influence, and secure her legacy, even if that path demanded cunning, ruthlessness, and unyielding determination. Cleopatra's early reign was immediately tested by Ptolemy XIII's supporters, who viewed her authority as fragile. She navigated these threats with a combination of diplomacy, strategic alliances, and calculated displays of power. By aligning herself with influential military leaders and loyal advisors, Cleopatra reinforced her position, demonstrating that she would neither be intimidated nor undermined. Every action sent a message. She was a queen who commanded respect, loyalty, and fear. Public perception was critical. Cleopatra understood that legitimacy required more than bloodline. It demanded the visible exercise of authority and intelligence. She engaged with citizens, religious leaders, and military commanders, showcasing wisdom, decisiveness, and fairness. Her ability to inspire loyalty and awe, even amidst a climate of political uncertainty, cemented her reputation as a sovereign capable of both charm and formidable command. Court intrigue remained relentless. Cleopatra maneuvered carefully, observing ministers and generals for signs of duplicity. She employed subtle strategies, from rewards for loyalty to quiet sidelining of opponents, ensuring that her influence remained unchallenged. The palace, a hive of espionage and plotting, became a proving ground where Cleopatra honed her skills in manipulation, persuasion, and psychological strategy. Her fears and ambitions drove innovation in governance. Cleopatra implemented policies that stabilized key regions, maintained trade networks, and balanced taxation. Her insight into both domestic and foreign affairs allowed her to anticipate threats and act decisively. She displayed an uncanny ability to calculate risks, using intellect, charm, and resolve to consolidate power while avoiding unnecessary bloodshed. Though she would not hesitate to act ruthlessly when required, Cleopatra's vision extended beyond mere survival. She sought not only to preserve her throne, but to elevate Egypt's influence and prestige. Her strategic alliances with Rome, her careful management of internal factions, and her command over advisors and generals demonstrated a leader fully aware of her potential and prepared to confront challenges with audacity, intelligence, and calculated ferocity. Cleopatra's ascension had transformed from inheritance to conquest of perception, securing her as a queen whose reign would leave an indelible mark on history. Cleopatra's entry into military strategy was immediate and intense. Egypt's throne was contested by her brother Ptolemy XIII, whose supporters sought to undermine her authority and seize power. Cleopatra, fully aware that diplomacy alone might not suffice, began coordinating with loyal generals, training in tactics, and studying previous Egyptian and Roman campaigns. Each maneuver, each alliance was calculated to protect her throne, while demonstrating her capacity as a ruler who could command armies with intellect and precision. The early battles were brutal and decisive. Cleopatra aligned with Julius Caesar, recognizing that Roman military support was essential against internal threats. Together, they confronted Ptolemy XIII's forces along the Nile, with rivers of blood marking the struggle for supremacy. Cleopatra's presence inspired her soldiers and intimidated her enemies, showcasing not only her charisma, but also her willingness to participate directly in matters of strategy and warfare. Victory and defeat tested her resolve. Cleopatra learned to navigate the chaos of battlefields where loyalty was fickle, alliances shifted rapidly, and the cost of miscalculation was immediate. She observed generals, adapted strategies, and made critical decisions under pressure, balancing risk with opportunity. Her keen understanding of terrain, troop morale, and enemy psychology became instrumental in consolidating her reign and defending Egypt's sovereignty. Relations with generals and soldiers were as strategic as the battles themselves. Cleopatra earned their respect through presence, intellect, and decisiveness, recognizing that loyalty required both fair leadership and the projection of authority. She bridged the gap between sovereign and soldier, ensuring her commands were obeyed while maintaining awareness of potential insurrection or treachery. This delicate balance of fear and respect was critical to sustaining military cohesion. The impact on cities and populations was profound. Egyptian citizens witnessed the consequences of rebellion, the devastation of battle, and the ruthlessness necessary to preserve the throne. Cleopatra's early military campaigns were not merely about defeating opponents. They were statements of power, reinforcing her legitimacy while demonstrating that Egypt's queen would not hesitate to wield force when necessary. The stage was set for a reign where war, strategy, and personal presence were inseparable. Cleopatra's alliance with Julius Caesar reshaped the battlefield. Roman legions brought discipline and strategy, while Cleopatra's intimate knowledge of Egypt's terrain provided critical advantages. Together, they orchestrated campaigns that combined cunning, speed, and psychological warfare. Cleopatra's presence on the Nile, observing troop movements and advising on tactics, demonstrated her active role as a military leader rather than a passive monarch. Her strategies often relied on deception and psychological insight. Cleopatra deployed feints, ambushes, and displays of wealth to intimidate adversaries, turning perception into a weapon. Soldiers and allies were inspired by her decisiveness, while enemies hesitated, uncertain whether they faced diplomacy, seduction, or the cold efficiency of calculated military force. Each engagement reinforced her reputation as both queen and commander. Victory came at great cost. Cities were burned, populations displaced, and rivers ran with the consequences of rebellion and war. Cleopatra bore the weight of these losses, understanding that her decisions carried the lives of thousands. Yet her resolve never wavered. Each hardship strengthened her mastery of power, instilling a ruthless pragmatism essential for survival in a volatile empire. Diplomacy remained entwined with military action. Cleopatra negotiated with local rulers, secured loyalty through incentives, and neutralized potential threats before they escalated into open conflict. Her ability to blend martial skill with political strategy set her apart from contemporary rulers, demonstrating a multidimensional approach that relied as much on intellect and persuasion as on force. By the end of these early campaigns, Cleopatra had secured her throne, stabilized key regions, and demonstrated that she was a ruler who could lead armies, command respect, and manipulate the perceptions of both allies and enemies. Her reputation as a military strategist, combined with her political cunning, solidified her place as one of the most formidable rulers of her time, a queen whose authority and presence would echo through history. Cleopatra's mastery of politics became evident as she stabilized her reign. She implemented reforms to strengthen central authority, balancing the interests of nobles, priests, and foreign powers. Law and justice were tools of power. Cleopatra dispensed both mercy and punishment with precision, ensuring loyalty while instilling fear in potential rebels. Her keen insight into human nature allowed her to manipulate perception, turning court intrigue into an instrument of control and projecting an image of invincibility. Economic policies were equally strategic. Cleopatra revitalized trade along the Nile and with the Mediterranean, establishing Egypt as a hub of wealth and influence. Taxation was restructured to ensure revenue without provoking unrest, while agricultural reforms stabilized food supply. Her policies bolstered the empire's strength, allowing her to maintain armies, fund infrastructure, and secure loyalty through patronage, reinforcing her dual image as both provider and sovereign. Handling betrayals became an art form. Courtiers and generals often plotted in secret, seeking advantage through intrigue. Cleopatra's intelligence network and careful observation allowed her to anticipate conspiracies and neutralize threats before they erupted into crisis. She used a combination of rewards, intimidation, and subtle manipulation, ensuring that power remained centralized while demonstrating that treachery carried lethal consequences. Rebellions and political opponents were met with a blend of force and strategy. Cleopatra deployed troops to quell uprisings while simultaneously negotiating with key leaders to prevent further dissent. Her ability to calculate risk and act decisively maintained stability in a kingdom prone to internal conflict and external pressure. The image of a ruler capable of both strategic mercy and ruthless efficiency reinforced her authority and discouraged potential challengers. Relations with foreign powers, particularly Rome, were crucial. Cleopatra navigated alliances and rivalries with unmatched skill, using diplomacy, marriage, and personal charisma to secure Egypt's sovereignty. She understood that external threats could be as dangerous as internal ones, and she manipulated perception to make Egypt a player of consequence on the Mediterranean stage. Her political strategies intertwined domestic control with international influence, solidifying her empire against both betrayal and invasion. Cleopatra maintained a delicate balance between tradition and innovation. She respected Egyptian religious practices, strengthening her legitimacy among priests and citizens, while adopting Greek administrative techniques to modernize governance. Temples, rituals, and festivals were carefully managed to display piety and power, blending spirituality with political strategy. This dual approach reinforced her image as a sovereign capable of bridging cultures, preserving heritage while asserting dominance. Her economic foresight extended to trade with distant regions. Cleopatra ensured Egypt remained a vital link between Africa, the Middle East, and the Mediterranean, controlling key ports and resources. By managing commerce with skill, she financed her armies, funded public works, and created a network of dependents that reinforced her authority. Her policies demonstrated that wealth was not only a tool for comfort, but a strategic weapon in consolidating power and influence. Betrayals continued to surface in both court and military ranks. Cleopatra's approach combined intelligence gathering, negotiation, and, when necessary, ruthless elimination. Potential threats were assessed meticulously, with loyalty rewarded and treachery punished, often in ways that sent a clear message to others. She cultivated an aura of vigilance and unpredictability, deterring dissent while maintaining authority. Public perception was central to her strategy. Cleopatra displayed both magnanimity and severity, attending ceremonies, distributing wealth, and participating in religious rituals while demonstrating the consequences of disloyalty. Citizens and nobles alike were made to understand that her power was absolute yet thoughtfully exercised. This careful balance reinforced loyalty while projecting strength to internal and external audiences. Her alliances with Rome deepened, particularly with Julius Caesar and later Mark Antony. Cleopatra's personal and political relationships were inseparable, leveraging charm, intellect, and strategic insight to influence powerful leaders. These connections ensured military support, deterred potential aggressors, and amplified Egypt's voice on the Mediterranean stage. Cleopatra's political acumen combined diplomacy, strategy, and personal agency to protect and expand her empire. Cleopatra's daily life reflected both luxury and vigilance. She resided in palaces adorned with gold, intricate mosaics, and exotic art, surrounded by advisors, servants, and scholars. Her diet included delicacies from across Egypt and the Mediterranean, yet she remained disciplined, understanding that appearances, health, and poise were instruments of power. Every gesture, every word, every appearance was a calculated statement of authority and elegance, reinforcing her dominance in the eyes of subjects and rivals alike. Her personal fears were constant companions. The threat of assassination, betrayal, or political displacement shadowed every interaction. Cleopatra relied on trusted confidence and an extensive intelligence network, yet she remained ever watchful, her charisma paired with caution. Luxury was never indulgence alone. It was a display of control, a means to inspire admiration while concealing the lethal precision with which she governed. Family relations were complex. Cleopatra navigated alliances and rivalries with her brothers, children, and extended dynasty. Her relationships combined affection, strategy, and pragmatism as she balanced personal bonds with political necessity. Even domestic life became a theatre for political instruction, reinforcing loyalty, managing perception, and preparing heirs for the brutal realities of rule. Scandals and intrigue were inevitable in the court of Alexandria. Cleopatra managed them with a combination of subtlety and ruthlessness. Courtiers who threatened her authority were neutralized, sometimes publicly, to send a clear message. Her enemies learned that charm and intellect could be as lethal as poison or sword, and that defiance carried immediate consequences. Tyranny and harsh justice defined her reputation. Cleopatra dispensed punishment with calculated efficiency, ensuring that rebellion or betrayal was met swiftly and decisively. Her rule combined the seduction of diplomacy with the threat of retribution, crafting a persona that was as feared as it was admired. Every decision reinforced her authority, her cunning, and her willingness to assert dominance without hesitation. Cleopatra's public presence was a deliberate performance of power. She attended religious ceremonies, state functions, and diplomatic meetings with grace and authority, projecting both elegance and command. Every detail, from clothing to speech, was calculated to reinforce her legitimacy, charm allies, and intimidate rivals. Her ability to blend personal allure with political strategy made her an unpredictable and formidable ruler. Her children were integral to her strategy. Cleopatra carefully managed their education, alliances, and appearances, using them as symbols of continuity, legitimacy, and power. The upbringing of her heirs was deeply intertwined with statecraft, preparing the next generation for the brutal realities of dynastic rule, while reinforcing her image as a queen who combined maternal authority with political acumen. Cleopatra's intimate relationships were inseparable from her political objectives. Her alliances with Julius Caesar and later Mark Antony extended Egypt's influence, secured military support, and reinforced her position against internal and external threats. These relationships, fueled by intellect, charm, and strategy, became instruments through which she projected power, manipulated rivals, and controlled the perception of her reign across the Mediterranean. Her court was a nexus of culture, diplomacy, and surveillance. Scholars, artisans, soldiers, and envoys coexisted in a delicate hierarchy, all under her watchful eye. Cleopatra managed this ecosystem with precision, ensuring loyalty, monitoring potential threats, and rewarding or punishing as necessary. The palace became both sanctuary and arena, where her skill in governance, manipulation, and intimidation was on constant display. The legacy of Cleopatra's personal rule was one of calculated luxury, rigorous discipline, and ruthless enforcement of authority. Her combination of sieges, harm, intellect, and terror ensured that enemies were wary, allies loyal, and subjects impressed. Cleopatra's life was a constant performance of power, blending beauty, strategy, and decisive action to secure her reign in a world where authority was contested at every turn and survival demanded both brilliance and ruthlessness. Cleopatra's reign was defined by epic confrontations. The struggle against her brother Ptolemy XIII had tested her cunning and resolve, but new enemies emerged as Rome's power loomed. Cleopatra faced rival generals, ambitious Egyptian nobles, and political factions who sought to exploit her youth and position. Each conflict demanded strategic brilliance, combining diplomacy, military maneuvering, and psychological insight. Battles became tests of intellect as much as force, where victory and survival were inseparable. The siege of Alexandria marked one of her most dramatic challenges. Cleopatra's forces, aligned with Julius Caesar, confronted entrenched Ptolemaic troops, with the city itself becoming a battlefield of rubble, smoke, and blood. Soldiers fought fiercely along the Nile, while citizens witnessed the chaos, instilling both fear and awe. Cleopatra's presence inspired loyalty, yet each decision carried mortal stakes. Miscalculation could spell her death or permanent exile. Her enemies were diverse and cunning. Ambitious nobles, rival generals, and foreign powers constantly threatened her authority. Cleopatra studied their strategies, predicted moves, and used both diplomacy and deception to neutralize opposition. Betrayal was ever present. Allies could shift loyalties overnight, requiring constant vigilance and adaptability. Her ability to anticipate threats became essential to both survival and victory. Defeats, though temporary, shaped her approach to warfare. Cleopatra learned from losses, refining strategies, adjusting tactics, and leveraging political alliances to recover quickly. Every setback revealed vulnerabilities, both her own and her enemies, and she adapted ruthlessly. The queen's resilience became legendary, transforming adversity into opportunity and reinforcing her image as a ruler who could withstand both military and political storms. The personal impact of these battles was profound. Cleopatra bore the weight of human loss, the destruction of cities, and the psychological toll of near defeat. Yet she remained unbroken, her resolve intensified by each challenge. Cleopatra's mastery of strategy, charisma, and ruthlessness ensured that even in the face of formidable enemies, she could turn crises into triumphs, solidifying her reputation as one of history's most formidable and cunning sovereigns. Cleopatra's partnership with Julius Caesar extended into decisive military campaigns that shaped the Mediterranean. Her knowledge of Egypt's geography allowed precise planning of troop movements and supply lines, while Roman discipline ensured coordinated assaults. Together, they executed strategies that crushed rebel factions, reclaimed lost territories, and demonstrated Cleopatra's active role as a commander, proving her leadership extended far beyond diplomacy or courtly influence. Her alliance with Caesar, however, drew envy and hostility. Roman senators and rival Egyptian nobles plotted against her, perceiving her as both a threat and a manipulative force. Cleopatra's skill in navigating these intrigues allowed her to maintain authority, employing a mix of diplomacy, seduction, and strategic concessions to neutralize potential uprisings. She learned that survival required constant vigilance and adaptive strategy. As Rome's influence expanded, Cleopatra faced new enemies, ambitious generals, opportunistic governors, and distant powers seeking to exploit instability. Each confrontation demanded a combination of military prowess, political negotiation, and psychological insight. Cleopatra's ability to predict moves, anticipate betrayal, and strike decisively became her most potent weapon, enabling her to maintain Egypt's sovereignty despite overwhelming external pressure. Even victories carried costs. Cities lay in ruins, civilians suffered, and the toll of conflict weighed heavily on the queen. Cleopatra's leadership balanced decisiveness with calculated restraint, ensuring that while enemies were defeated, Egypt's core stability remained intact. Her ability to manage the consequences of war reinforced her reputation as a ruler capable of both ruthlessness and strategic foresight. The culmination of these early campaigns set the stage for Cleopatra's enduring legacy as a strategist, diplomat, and monarch. Her victories, alliances, and resilience in the face of enemies ensured that she remained unchallenged on her throne while projecting power beyond Egypt's borders. Cleopatra emerged not only as a survivor of conflict, but as a sovereign who could manipulate war, diplomacy, and human perception with unparalleled skill. Cleopatra's later years were fraught with mounting pressures. The political landscape shifted as Rome's internal conflicts intensified, with Octavian rising against Mark Antony, her ally. Cleopatra faced constant stress, paranoia, and fear of betrayal, as even her closest advisors could be swayed by shifting loyalties. The weight of empire, combined with personal stakes in love and alliance, tested her mental resilience to its limits, forcing her to navigate a labyrinth of intrigue with acute vigilance. Rebellions and internal unrest strained her resources. Egyptian provinces occasionally resisted taxation or foreign influence, while court factions vied for control. Cleopatra responded with a mix of diplomacy, calculated intimidation, and strategic use of military force, yet the continuous cycle of challenges revealed vulnerabilities in even her meticulous governance. Her awareness of mortality and political fragility intensified, creating tension between ambition and survival. Psychological strain manifested subtly yet powerfully. Cleopatra displayed moments of intense calculation and occasional emotional withdrawal, reflecting the immense pressure of ruling in an era of betrayal and war. Her fears of assassination, exile, or loss of power became almost constant companions, yet she remained outwardly composed, projecting confidence while internally strategizing for both immediate survival and long-term influence. External threats compounded her challenges. Octavian's campaigns in the eastern Mediterranean forced her to rely heavily on Mark Antony's loyalty, exposing Egypt to potential invasion and diminishing autonomy. Cleopatra's ability to assess, manipulate, and respond to these threats became critical, as failure could mean not only personal death but the collapse of the dynasty she had fought to preserve. Despite escalating dangers, Cleopatra continued to exercise shrewd governance. She fortified cities, secured alliances, and maintained economic stability wherever possible, blending pragmatism with charisma. Yet the relentless pressure of court intrigue, war, and Roman politics signaled the beginning of decline, highlighting the fragility of even the most brilliant reign when faced with overwhelming external forces and the corrosive effects of paranoia. Cleopatra's relationship with Mark Antony became both a political necessity and a personal anchor. Together, they sought to resist Octavian's rising power, consolidating forces and securing alliances across the eastern Mediterranean. Yet the pressures of constant warfare, betrayal, and shifting loyalties weighed heavily, amplifying stress and deepening paranoia. Cleopatra's mental fortitude was tested as never before, balancing personal devotion with the ruthless calculations required to protect her throne. Court betrayals intensified. Advisors, generals, and even family members occasionally conspired or acted in self-interest, forcing Cleopatra to navigate layers of deception. Every decision carried mortal risk. A misstep could trigger revolt or provide Octavian a pretext for invasion. Her brilliance in reading human nature, combined with strategic ruthlessness, became essential in identifying allies and neutralizing threats before they could destabilize her reign. Military setbacks exposed vulnerabilities. Despite Antony's loyalty, decisive Roman victories gradually weakened their position. Cities fell, troops suffered losses, and morale faltered. Cleopatra's ability to inspire loyalty and coordinate countermeasures was strained by the relentless pressure of external threats. Yet she continued to strategize, negotiate, and manipulate perception, maintaining the illusion of control even as circumstances grew dire. Stress and paranoia shaped her leadership style. Cleopatra's decisions increasingly relied on careful calculation, often mingled with intuition drawn from decades of political and military experience. Her awareness of betrayal, vulnerability, and mortality drove her to act with a combination of preemptive ruthlessness and calculated diplomacy, ensuring her authority remained visible even when her power base was under siege. As external forces closed in, Cleopatra faced the harsh reality of decline. Her empire, once vibrant and dominant, began to weaken under the dual pressures of Roman expansion and internal instability. Yet even in the shadow of loss, Cleopatra's intellect, charisma, and strategic skill remained formidable. Her responses to these crises reflected a queen who, until the very end, sought to shape her destiny with courage, cunning, and indomitable resolve. Cleopatra's death in 30 BC marked the end of the Ptolemaic dynasty and the independent Egyptian monarchy. Surrounded by the consequences of military defeat, political betrayal, and the collapse of her alliance with Mark Antony, she faced a stark choice between humiliation in Roman captivity and self-determined fate. Historical accounts suggest she chose suicide, reputedly by the bite of an asp, though the exact details remain shrouded in uncertainty and legend. Her decision was both personal and political, preserving her dignity and control over her final moments. In her final hours, Cleopatra orchestrated events with deliberate care. She ensured the safety and positioning of her children, sent messages to Roman leaders, and made arrangements for her burial. Her composure in the face of death reflected a life spent mastering perception and control. Even in surrender to mortality, she demonstrated strategy, foresight, and an unyielding sense of sovereignty, turning her death into a statement of power rather than defeat. Public reaction was a mix of shock, grief, and awe. Citizens mourned a queen who had navigated unprecedented challenges, from domestic conspiracies to Rome's expansive reach. Priests and court officials observed rituals and honored her as both ruler and divine figure, blending grief with recognition of her historical significance. Cleopatra's death reverberated throughout Alexandria, leaving a void in political, cultural, and social spheres. Family reactions were equally intense. Her children, already symbols of dynastic continuity, were thrust into uncertainty. Cleopatra's careful guidance had prepared them for political survival, but her absence left them vulnerable to Roman authority. Her death catalyzed immediate power shifts, allowing Octavian to consolidate control and extinguish the independent Egyptian monarchy, bringing centuries of dynastic Rule to a close. The empire at Cleopatra's death was fractured but enduring in legacy. Political power shifted to Rome, yet her influence persisted culturally, socially, and symbolically. Cleopatra's final acts reflected a queen who, even in death, controlled her narrative, secured her children's potential futures, and preserved the dignity and mystique that would ensure her memory endured as one of history's most iconic and formidable rulers. Cleopatra's death set off immediate political maneuvers. Octavian moved swiftly to solidify Roman control over Egypt, installing governors and reorganizing administration. Cleopatra's children, though spared initially, were drawn into Rome's orbit as political pawns, their dynastic claims neutralized. The fall of the Ptolemaic dynasty signaled not only the end of a royal line, but also the absorption of Egypt into the Roman Empire, transforming its sovereignty and influence forever. Mark Antony's demise had already compounded the tragedy. His suicide, spurred by false news of Cleopatra's death, removed her staunchest ally and cemented Octavian's dominance. Cleopatra's careful orchestration of events ensured that even in the vacuum left by Antony, her image as a decisive and intelligent ruler endured, reinforcing the narrative of a queen who had shaped history until her final breath. The funerary arrangements were deliberate and symbolic. Cleopatra was interred in a tomb near the Nile, with ceremonies blending Egyptian tradition and royal prestige. Her burial served as both homage and political statement, preserving her dignity while signaling the closure of Ptolemaic authority. The rituals reinforced her legacy as a sovereign who combined cultural reverence with personal agency, even in death. Public perception immortalized Cleopatra. Stories of her intelligence, beauty, cunning, and command spread across Egypt and Rome, blending fact and legend. Artists, historians, and poets captured her life in works that emphasized both her strategic brilliance and the dramatic arc of her final moments. Cleopatra became a symbol of sovereignty, intelligence, and the inextricable intertwining of personal and political power. The immediate aftermath reshaped Egypt and the Mediterranean. Roman control was absolute, yet Cleopatra's influence persisted through culture, diplomacy, and myth. Her decisions in life and death preserved her narrative, ensuring that while her dynasty fell, her legacy as a powerful, intelligent, and indomitable queen endured, shaping history, inspiring fascination, and leaving an indelible mark on civilization. Cleopatra's succession plan was undone by Roman conquest, yet her legacy endured through her children and their symbolic roles. Caesarion, her son with Julius Caesar, was briefly recognized as pharaoh before being executed under Octavian's orders, ending the direct Ptolemaic line. Her other children with Mark Antony were taken to Rome, integrated into the Roman sphere, and used as instruments of political narrative, highlighting Cleopatra's enduring influence even after her death. Her governance reshaped perceptions of female rulership. Cleopatra demonstrated that intellect, charisma, and strategy could rival martial might. Her ability to command armies, negotiate with Rome, and manipulate alliances made her a figure whose authority transcended gender norms of her era. Subsequent rulers, both in Egypt and abroad, studied her methods of diplomacy, persuasion, and psychological strategy, embedding her influence in political thought and historiography. Culturally, Cleopatra left an indelible mark. Alexandria remained a center of learning, trade, and art, with her patronage enhancing scholarship, architecture, and science. Her blending of Egyptian and Hellenistic traditions reinforced cross-cultural exchange, fostering a cosmopolitan environment that influenced art, literature, and governance long after her reign. Cleopatra's persona, intelligent, beautiful, and politically adept, became a template for portrayals of powerful female leaders in literature and visual culture. Militarily, Cleopatra's campaigns and strategic alliances altered the Mediterranean balance of power. Her decisions in collaboration with Caesar and Antony shaped Rome's expansion, influenced the outcomes of wars, and affected the fates of multiple states. Even in defeat, her capacity to wield influence over military and political events ensured that Egypt's sovereignty and importance were recognized, leaving a blueprint for diplomacy that integrated personal presence with national interest. Ultimately, Cleopatra's life and reign exemplify the intersection of intellect, ambition, and charisma. Her strategies in politics, warfare, and diplomacy, combined with personal agency, ensured that her influence endured far beyond her death. She became an icon of power, intelligence, and resilience, a queen whose story continues to captivate, instruct, and inspire, securing her place as one of history's most formidable and unforgettable rulers. Cleopatra's long-term influence extended into Roman politics. Her relationships with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony reshaped alliances, provoked wars, and influenced the rise of Octavian, who became Augustus, the first Roman emperor. Through these interactions, Cleopatra's strategic acumen left an imprint on Roman history, demonstrating how a single sovereign could manipulate the ambitions of the Mediterranean's most powerful men, altering the course of empires. Her dynastic policies, though ultimately extinguished by Rome, set precedents for governance and succession. Cleopatra sought to consolidate authority, maintain loyalty, and secure her lineage through marriage and children. While her direct line ended tragically, the lessons of her reign about centralization, diplomacy, and strategic use of familial bonds resonated with rulers who followed, both within Egypt and in broader Hellenistic realms. In arts and literature, Cleopatra became an enduring symbol of power and allure. Poets, playwrights, and historians across centuries portrayed her as a figure of intelligence, beauty, and political genius. Her story inspired countless works, from Roman accounts to Renaissance paintings, embedding her life into the collective imagination as the archetype of a ruler whose personal qualities amplified political authority and left an indelible cultural legacy. Cleopatra's military strategies continued to influence historians and generals. Her campaigns alongside Caesar and Antony, her use of diplomacy, and her ability to anticipate enemy movements were studied as examples of integrating political foresight with tactical execution. Even in defeat, her maneuvers demonstrated the effectiveness of combining personal presence, psychological insight, and strategic alliance, offering timeless lessons in leadership and statecraft. Her ultimate legacy is one of resilience, intellect, and enduring influence. Cleopatra's reign demonstrated that power could be wielded through mind as much as sword, through persuasion as much as force. She shaped history, culture, and perception, leaving an extraordinary imprint on subsequent civilizations. Cleopatra remains a symbol of sovereign authority, feminine brilliance, and strategic mastery, immortalized as one of the most iconic and formidable rulers in world history.